Raul for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great pleasure and privilege of chatting with Brad Russell. Now, for a lot of you that have been watching the magazine, kind of following the magazine, you've seen little bits of Brad coming to the surface. The most recent was Jonathan Moody's review of Brad's CD, The Daily Shred. And so that, I believe that was just in June or July, so it was this summer. Going back a little bit, we had some video lessons from Brad. I think we had a bit about your first CD when it came out. It's amazing how time flies. There's all these things that kind of accumulate. So a lot of it has been just kind of the ongoing little blurbs of knowing what's going on with you, Brad. And for those that haven't really seen, we even had a questionnaire. I remember you'd answered questions. So for people that want to know a little more in detail, if we don't touch base on it today, you can go back and find out a little more. My understanding, you're originally from Detroit and currently in New York City.
Correct.
Perfect. So what would you like to share with us to kind of fill in about you, kind of to start out with, so people that haven't had the chance to kind of catch all these bits in Bass Musician Magazine to know a little bit more about you?
Oh, sure. First, I'd like to say thanks for inviting me to do this interview. It's a pleasure to do it, and I'm really glad that you guys are out there, supporting all of us bass players. It's very encouraging.
Very welcome. We love doing it.
Yeah, I can tell you're very passionate. You can usually, if somebody is passionate about something themselves, they can usually recognize that in someone else. I mean, I just see how attentive you are. You always respond. You're constantly updating things. I mean, it seems like you guys are on it 24/7. I know you have other things you have to do in your life, so I can tell that you're committed to it, and it's really cool to see that. I think you guys are kind of unique. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. But enough about us. How about you?
I'm just a bass player I'm using the social media. I think it's great to be able to do this stuff. As far as my playing and my background, I mean, I kind of wish sometimes that I only liked one style of music, because I confuse people sometimes, because I play a lot of different styles, and I play both upright bass and I play electric, and my background is really it's pretty cool, I have to say, and it's not because of me. It's because of where I grew up and my family. My dad was a musician. My mom went and saw Charlie Parker when she was a kid, and Oscar Peterson and Bill Evans, and so I grew up with her love of jazz and her actual live experience of seeing these legends. Mm-hmm. And my two older brothers were musicians, and we grew up in Detroit and then moved out to the suburbs, but still the Metro Detroit area. And that area is, I mean, most people know it just from Motown, but it was rich in jazz and rock. A lot of great rock musicians have come out of Detroit, and of course the Motown sound. So I grew up around all of that, and I started singing first with my brothers when I was 8 years old, listening to Jackson 5 records and I love the Osmonds too. People crack on them, but they were really good. Donny Osmond had a great voice, still does. So I grew up doing that, and then I got into playing upright bass in high school or middle school. Mm-hmm. And because my dad played upright bass, so I didn't even touch an electric bass till I was around 18, really. I would listen to a lot of cool records, everything from Earth, Wind and Fire to Chicago to Grand Funk Railroad. Then my brothers exposed me to Return to Forever, Stanley Clarke, and that changed everything. And then I heard Jocko, but I was studying classical bass at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I had a strong background in practicing. I studied with a bassist from the Detroit Symphony, Maxim Janowski. He was a very renowned bass instructor for classical bass. So I was very disciplined. And then when I switched over to playing, more contemporary types, music, jazz and fusion and rock, I always carried that classical discipline that I had. So I was kind of an odd duck. I mean, I didn't really party or do any of that stuff. I would practice all the time. I skipped school to practice while the kids were out like partying and stuff. But anyhow, so I carried that discipline over, and then I went to music school at the University of Miami. And that was a very cool place because Steve Morris had went there, and Pat Metheny and Jocko taught there. And so it was this cool mix of rocker fusion guys and straight ahead jazz guys. Mm-hmm. So I was able to kind of continue doing everything. And, so anyhow, it was hard sometimes to hone in, on one style.
Gotcha.
So, but I put out videos now. For years I gigged as a working bass player, and I still do. Mm-hmm. But I kind of put aside my aspirations of being a bass soloist and doing my own sort of stuff because I just needed to work. And you hear the sirens? Those will be all throughout. I can't do anything about that. That's life in New York City.
That is New York City. I've been there, done that.
So you're gonna get a real flavor of New York in this video. Yeah. Anyhow, so when I decided I wanted to start doing my own stuff, it was basically because all the guys that I grew up being influenced by, from Stanley to Billy Sheehan to Eddie Van Halen to Steve Vai, all had their own voice and did their own thing, as well as other bass players. I always admired Will Lee and Chuck Rainey and Nathan East for being those session guys too, and Abe Laboriel, all those guys. I thought that was cool too. So I was kind of missing that. So I started doing my own stuff, and it was very much in the rock instrumental thing, using overdrive on my bass, and I had the Kaler install a tremolo bar on my bass, and I really went full bore with doing a lead rock bass thing. And that's pretty much what I focus on with my CDs and a lot of the video stuff that I put out. Is just trying to get out my own creative voice. Sure. But I'm very much a traditional bass player, and I find that sometimes people don't even know that, or they get on a little bit of that traditionalist bandwagon, and they're like, yeah, why don't you just play guitar and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so anyhow, I'm versatile. I mean, I play Broadway shows on upright and electric bass. I played straight up blues gigs, and then I did recording with Joe Satriani, and I toured with guitar player Gary Hoey, who's a straight up rock guy. And, so I just, I like music that has a lot of energy to it, regardless of whether it's style that has a real, ferociousness and passion to it. So when I play, that's why I like rock. I mean, rock to me has an attitude, Gotcha. So that, when I heard Eddie Van Halen for the first time, and Steve Vai, I mean, that just spoke to me because of the energy. And Billy Sheehan, I was just like, so I love that stuff, but, yeah, so that's basically it. I'm kind of, sometimes misunderstood, I feel.
Well, and I think it's important that people, I'd almost compare it to crayons. And this will sound kind of, you go, what are you talking about? But when I was a kid, they used to sell like crayons, and you could get the package with only 10 colors, or you could get this really great package that had like 150 colors. And so by having more crayons in your box, it doesn't mean you have a compromise in what you draw. It just means you have more possibilities to draw from in your creative outlet and how you see music. I think one of the common things we run into is that a lot of musicians, especially in rock, admittedly don't read music. Now, I reading is a weak area in my life, and admittedly, every time I pick up my bass, I'd rather play for the fun of it, enjoy just doing it, than do the work, because it does take doing some work to get good at sight reading and having those skills. But as far as higher ability and the flexibility to fit into sitting in Broadway or getting, some of these gigs, if you bring more crayons to the table with you, possibilities expand enormously. And I think we had the opportunity to interview some of the bassists that have been with some of the groups. We talked with Ross Valerie from Journey, and I mean, he's been with them for like 45 years. I mean,
I had no Ross.
It's an extraordinary gig, but it's very unique that you can find a niche with that kind of longevity that is going to work for you. And it's not that he lacks for outside interests, but the most common thing I see is musicians needing to be able to segue kind of to the next thing. And, even with some of the gigs that some people feel, oh, this would be my dream gig, you see people letting him go. And we spoke with a couple of bassists that had been with a group and left for a while because they said, okay, I've done this, I want to do something else. And then maybe they came back, and that versatility is an important thing in music. And I have to say, I can probably count with fingers on my hand bassists that go well transitioning from upright to electric. And I myself am pretty much exclusively electric, more for just lack of opportunity and probably somebody to teach me. But it's another skill that when those Broadway gigs come up, you go, yeah, could you do upright? Sure, no problem. So it's very good to bring that to the table. I also think that the input, because you've been in a lot of geographic locations, you've played in San Francisco.
Quite a bit. Yeah.
Miami would bring you a lot of the Latin influence with what you just hear in the streets there. New York City's got a huge Latin component as well. But I really enjoy hearing a lot of the musics from the rest of the world. And, whether it's them, it's kind of interesting because some of this really hard rock we're getting is coming from Brazil. And in places like that, and the greatest form of flattery is like, they're playing
that's true.
Our music.
Not to interrupt you.
Oh, no, carry on.
The drummer that I would bring him up sooner or later in this interview because he's so phenomenal, is from Brazil, Achilles Priester. And I have a new CD I'm working on, and he's the drummer on it. And we met through Facebook, but through him, I've gained a lot of fans in Brazil, that love the shredding rock stuff, man. And then some of the bands that I've seen, some videos I've seen of him and his bands in Brazil, ridiculous. I mean, these guys are shredding, man. They're just, they're young guys, whereas over here, you go to certain concerts by certain artists, and it's like it's the 40-plus crowd.
Oh, yeah. Well,
maybe they'll bring their son who likes it, but I think in other countries, especially like South America or maybe even in Mexico, you have younger, people in their 20s that dig hard rock.
Certainly. And they're departing from what is they're kind of breaking away from what is their cultural musical background, and that's kind of an interesting thing, both from an identity of even how they're looking. And it's always it cracks me up because Brazilian rock groups sing in English too, so they're not singing in Portuguese. They're like, English is the language of rock. We're gonna hammer it down there, and it's very respectable, kind of their approach. Although I enjoy a lot of what they have, like Brazilian progressions and the percussive elements that you get from Brazilians, is just exquisite, and I can't get enough of it. But with all of this versatility and all of this background, what's in the future? What do you got in the works?
Whoever gives me a gig, man. No, I mean, for me, what I plan for myself is to do more of my solo stuff.
Gotcha.
To market myself more, and it's a tough one, you know, but there's a market for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always inspired by, you know, the jazz musicians that I know here in New York City, because jazz is, you know, it's not a commercial music, and specific people listen to it, and they're able to make a living. But once again, they're going outside of the United States, mostly Europe and maybe even over to Japan.
Totally.
And so I look at that as no different for what I'm doing. Although it's not jazz, it's instrumental music, and I'm a bass player, so it's a very tight little niche, but
Sure.
There's a market for it. I just need to keep pushing ahead. It's hard to do that. I'll spend hours networking, you know, and connecting with people, and I should be practicing, you know, so it's tough to do all that on your own. But my plan is to just continue on what I'm doing, to open, like I'm doing a few dates opening for other people, and I'm just playing by myself or with a drummer and using a loop pedal and doing something that's different than you would normally see, not the norm, and also it's kind of not, it's not really different by intentionally, or part of it maybe it just happened that way, and another part is I can't afford to pay a bunch of other musicians, and it's
Sure.
hard to get musicians to commit. They have other things, especially in New York. They're so busy, and it's really difficult to get people to commit. So if you're lucky enough to get one other guy or two other guys to be able to commit and have like minds to what you're doing musically and what you want to do career-wise with your music, you're doing pretty good. So I just kind of saw that and said, well, I'm going to try to do this, you know, just bass and drums and use a loop pedal and be creative with it. And I think that it will fit. So I'm doing that, you know, and, you know, finding the right types of acts to open for.
Sure.
Where the audience will get what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
At least, you know, I mean, because I've done some situations here in New York. I mean, it's cool in one way because it's a throwback to the way it used to be. Like, I see signs of like posters from the Fillmore back in the 60s, and you'd have like Miles Davis and Jimi Hendrix and Mama's what was that band, Mamas and the Papas or whatever it was? Or, you'd have like all the Monkees or Jimi Hendrix or something. Whereas now it's very much, you know, rap with rap and, you know, jazz with jazz or whatever style, you know. So I would do some gigs here in New York where I'd play like right after some girl with an acoustic piano kind of doing a Nora Jones sort of thing. And she'd have all her friends there. And I'd be like, oh, boy, this is going to be interesting when I get up there and start playing. But, you know, in a way it's cool because it's all – it kind of, I mean, really, it's all music, but, you know, because of just the way we are and just how we have to put everything in its compartment, we tend to, you know, stereotype things and whatnot. But
Sure.
Anyway, the point being is that, you know, this kind of thing maybe wouldn't go over with a singer-songwriter sort of a crowd. But
Gotcha.
Well, then again, maybe they would like some of it. I mean, you know, so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to work on playing live, opening for certain types of artists that I would musically work with, and then focusing on maybe also incorporating that into clinics. I've done some clinics and I enjoy them. I'm still searching for the right company that will get on board with me to have me do more clinics, because I think the ones I've done have been kind of a combination of performing and then doing a Q&A, which I think is really cool.
Sure.
So I just need, right now times are a little tough with some of these companies, because of the internet, and people buy instruments offline or online now and stuff. So a lot of reps really dig what I do, but they're like, man, we got to make money right now,
Sure.
So it's tough that way. But
well, and you're mentioning instruments, which brings up gear. I know everybody always wants to talk a little bit about gear, and I can't help but noticing the Aria with the whammy bar behind you.
Yeah. Where is it? Is it there? Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, hey, is that a whammy bar on that? What's going on? But tell us a little bit about what you're playing on.
Oh yeah, I kind of switched over to using this Aria. They kind of lost popularity in the United States. They were big in the 80s. I mean, I've known about Aria Pro since I was a teenager. But I was introduced to them at an AM show through the guys at Kaler that make the tremolo bar. Bob Smith actually introduced me to the guys at Aria, and they're from Japan, and I figured maybe they would kind of dig the shredding kind of rock thing I was doing. I mean, and they did, and then we just started communicating. So they made me it's a new model of theirs called the RSB 1500. But they kind of customized, they painted it a solid color for me, because most of the finishes they have show the wood grain, and it's beautiful, but I kind of just wanted a solid color, and it has a maple neck, and I've never played maple before, so that was cool, and I like it a lot. And Kaler, had them install a tremolo bar on it, and it's a 4-string. I do play 5, but I prefer 4 for my own stuff. So I like it. It's different because it's a little bigger, and it's almost a little more like a Fender, but it has 24 frets, which is cool, so I can get the full 2 octaves. And it has a really nice cutaway, which is kind of a thing that really gets under my skin, man. When all these companies make these 24 fret basses, but you can't get to the last few frets because of the cutaways.
I hear you.
Why did you do that? Whereas they made a nice cutaway. So I had EMGs put in it, and it's cool. It's a cool bass. I like it. It took a little getting used to, because I was used to a smaller scale bass. And it, once again, I never used maple, and I do hear the difference between ebony and rosewood in maple. And I think for the tapping and stuff that I'm doing, I think it's better, actually, for me, for the style that I'm playing. I think it works better, the maple. It's subtle, but I can hear the difference. So
now you've got it loaded up with boomers, right?
Yeah, GHS boomers, yeah. I'm an endorser of GHS, and they're very cool guys, and they're from Michigan, based out of Michigan, which is cool. So yeah, Jonathan Moody at Boomers is and Chris, those guys are very cool, and yeah, I like those strings. They feel good. They sound good. They last long, but I kill strings instantly. I sweat a lot, man. So it's just like, but they're nice strings. They have a good tone.
Cool.
For what I'm doing, I think they're perfect.
And amplification-wise, what are you running? I know probably with shows you're using a lot of DI stuff.
Yeah, I use Hartke.
Okay.
I have their high drive 410 cabinet, and I'm using 500 watt head. And I also have a little Mark bass amp that I use in New York, because if you've ever been to New York or spent any time here, man, nobody's playing an SVT, I mean, it's like, unless it's backline in the club, I moved here. I had a gig at the Bitter End, which is a famous club in New York, and I never played there before, and I didn't have an amp. I didn't bring an amp here with me. I had GK, only just a little GK12 for practice and for playing upright.
Mm-hmm.
And I called the club and I said, "You have backline, right?" They said, "We just have a 410 cabinet. We don't have it. You have to bring your own amp head." I was like, "Oh crap! I better get an amp." I'm like, "What do I do?" I didn't know anybody really to borrow anything, so I went to Guitar Center because they had that 30-day thing where you could buy it and bring it back. And even the salesman said, "Hey, try out this little Mark bass amp, little Mark Bass 2, the little head." And if you use it, you don't like it, bring it back. I'm like, okay, cool. So I took it to the club. I took it out of the box. It was brand new. I plugged it in, and it sounded really good. And it was like smaller than my laptop. So I wound up keeping it. That was like 8 years ago, and I kept it. So I use that around here when I play because just logistics. It's very small.
Sure. Well, and just weight nowadays, we don't get it. We're not getting any younger. So you start counting every ounce when you're going both in the instrument and in your gear.
Yeah.
If you're the one that's carrying your own stuff.
Yeah, it gets way heavier too after a long night of playing.
Totally.
Yeah. So that's an issue too. I used to use an Ampeg 410 and a 15, the Classic, I think it was called, and I love the sound of that stuff. But man, those cabinets are like they weigh a ton. They're really heavy. So that's not going to happen in New York. But so mostly I'm using the Harkey cabinet, and I switch off between the Harkey head and the little Mark Bass head.
Nice.
Yeah.
So moving away from gear, what advice would you have for young musicians that are thinking of doing what you're doing, living their life of passion for bass and, kind of making a living at it?
Well, some of the best advice that was given to me was from my dad, who did play bass, but was also an electrician. And that's how I was afforded the opportunity to follow my passion, because he had another job, but he loved music, and he told me, "You don't have to get a part-time job after school. As long as I hear that bass when I'm come home from work, I want to hear you practicing every day, because that is your job. You treat that like a job, and you get good at it." Because that's a job. Mm-hmm. And I never forgot that. And also, once again, being from Detroit, and my family were blue collar, and, worked very hard to get to where they were. Work ethic was a big thing. So, and then that combined with, I studied with a classical bass teacher. I would say to people, younger guys, and I teach, and I have students. I've taught high school level students at the Interlochen Music Academy for the last couple summers. And,
nice.
Kids want to be taught. They want to be taught. Maybe the methods are a little different now than they were when I was growing up, but I'm glad that I was disciplined. I think you have to be disciplined. You got to treat it like a job.
Sure.
All the way down the line, even to how you dress on stage. I went to do a gig once, and the guy said, "You look like everybody else in the club. I don't want you to look like everybody else. I want you to look like you should be up on stage." Mm-hmm. So, there are different styles of dressing for different gigs, but I agree with that. What he meant was to have a certain image, and I think that's important, as well as your skill level. And I think, seek out a good instructor. YouTube videos aren't going to do it. Everybody's like, "Yeah, I can get free online lessons." Those are cool if you can already play. Like, I look at I watch a Billy Sheehan video and be like, "Oh, how does he do that? Wait a minute." And I'm at a level where I can figure out what he's doing, but there's no replacement for having a live, real teacher. So I just think it's real important to get a teacher and to have a practice regimen, and to work on, if you're in a band, to work on your image, sure. Your performance, videotape yourself. Today you can do that, watch yourself, study yourself, listen to yourself, be brutally honest, but don't beat yourself up. You have to have faith in what you do. But I would say, it's a job. So if you're going to go into it full time, you really got to you got to really, invest in it all the way around.
Sure.
And if you want to be a working bass player, yeah, you got to learn how to read music. There's no way around that. I mean, if you want to do sessions or play any sort of shows, and I'm talking pop gigs too. I mean, they're going to give you charts. My buddies I went to music school with play with Shakira, they play with Gloria Estefan, they play with Ricky Martin, they play with all these pop. It's not just classical and jazz and Broadway shows. I mean, I did a rehearsal with these hardcore heavy metal dudes that were playing Meshuggah type stuff, and they gave me charts.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't read it until I couldn't sight read it. It was so hard, but wow. I took it home and I practiced it, and thank God they gave me charts because I couldn't have figured this stuff out. I mean, it was really hard, but they were trained musicians. So I would say go to music school if you can afford to, or get a scholarship. It's expensive these days, but music school has kind of replaced the old days. Musicians had communities back then, a lot more jam sessions. I'm talking way back 50s and 60s, and those days aren't quite like that anymore. I think music schools have replaced that. It's just where you form a community. You get around a bunch of like-minded people, and you also find out that you're not the fastest kid on the block anymore.
Totally.
There's especially you go to Berklee College of Music, there's I don't know how many bass players are there. I mean, there's hundreds of bass players there, and some of these kids can play like Victor Wooten right now, and they're 18. So, it's just good to be around that. It's healthy, I think. So I would do all that, study, practice, and have a regimented practice routine, and use social media to enhance what you do. It's a great tool today for kids today. I mean, I'm from the records and cassette era, just
sure.
How do you play that? Wait a minute, how do you do that? Rewind, press. Trying to figure out Billy Sheehan's solos, no video, no YouTube, cassette.
Totally. Well, and it's interesting because it has been an evolution, even in the way that music is shared and transmitted, and so for records are making a little bit of a comeback, kind of a more retro thing, but the fidelity of the sound is superior in so many of these other formats nowadays that if you're listening to records, it's just out of, I don't know, kind of a retro desire. But listening to it go, it's just yeah, I remember that. Or changing tracks, which before you used to have to get the needle to skip, drop it in the right place and all that. So anyway, I won't belabor things with the old days, but Brad, I really appreciate you taking time and giving us this insight into your current bass life. It's great for musicians to get to know you more. Are you actively taking students at this time? If people, how would somebody reach you to do that?
Well, the best, I have my website, but I'm actually more active on Facebook than I am on my website, which I'm going to redesign. But they could go to Brad Russell Bass in Your Face, BASSINYOFACE on Facebook, and they'll find me, and they can just PM me there, or they'll see my actual personal Facebook, which has become more like a website. Sure. And they can private message me there. I've been getting, actually through those live, I love doing those Facebook live videos. I saw actually this guitar player named Greg Koch, I think is his name. He inspired me because he does quite a few, and he's a great player. And I've been getting students through that. It's just really cool to be able to open up. It's like a little bass forum, and you can just kind of have a dialogue with people. So
very cool.
Yeah, definitely. I love teaching, and I could use a lot more students.
There you go. Well, again, thank you ever so much. Bass people, check out Brad Russell, both CDs, The Daily Shred, I got to remember that. Check that out. And certainly you'll see him on our Facebook wall occasionally. I know that I get some stuff, and we're sharing. So you've seen it here. Brad Russell on Bass Musician Magazine.
Cool. Thanks, man.
There you go.